everyone to the Solve It Educational webinar series. Today, we will be unlocking the secrets of cybersecurity insurance. Be sure to check out the rest of our series in the link that I'm putting into the chat right now. You can click that link and get to our events calendar, and that will show you the rest of the series that we have currently through the end of the year. Today, we're unlocking the secrets of cybersecurity insurance. Then in November, we are taking a look at managed detection and response in conjunction with a security operations center that operates 24/7 that sits behind an IT team. And then in December, we will be meeting with Microsoft CSP to discuss leveraging cloud solutions and cloud technologies, virtual machines, and developing an incident response plan. So today, everyone's encouraged to ask questions in the chat window. I'll do my best to keep up and relate those to our speaker. So just as a quick intro, managed IT service providers and internal IT staff are responsible for managing your company's data security. No security is foolproof. So insurance is a vital fallback if your security protections fail for any reason. Therefore, it's vital for your IT team to work with your insurance provider for two reasons. Number one, to ensure you have the right protections in place to get the best price on your policy. And number two, to ensure the actions of IT during a crisis enhance the likelihood of a successful claim if and when you need it. Hopefully you won't need it, but if something happens, you definitely do not want your claim to be denied. Since 2021, there's been an exponential increase in cyber attacks because anyone can become a hacker. There's no IT expertise needed. You can buy a kit on the dark web, so all you need is a little cash and some moral flexibility. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the founder and CEO of our partner, SeedPod Cyber, Doug Kreitzberg, to explain further. Thank you, Doug, for being here.
Sure. Thank you, Eddie. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to learn a little bit about cyber insurance and what you can do to put yourself in the best position to obtain terms at favorable pricing. What I'll do today is I'm going to walk through, talk a little bit about what is cyber insurance. And then I'll talk about, what has changed over the years with regards to how cyber insurance is underwritten and priced. And then I'll talk about the things that you can do from a technical standpoint and from a governance standpoint to make sure that you're obtaining those terms that you need in order to take on the risks that you need to in your business. So I'm going to share my screen here and to walk through the presentation. A little bit of background on SeedPod Cyber. As Eddie mentioned, we're a partner with Solve IT, and what we do is we work with organizations like Eddie's to provide embedded cyber insurance solutions into the tech stacks that they're offering their clients here. And because of that relationship, we're often able to provide that insurance at favorable terms as well. Just to give a little background on what cyber insurance is. I'll give kind of the formal terminology. Cyber insurance covers you, this is the business, in the event of a malicious or intentional act that impacts the confidentiality, integrity, or accessibility of your system. That's a mouthful, but basically it covers you when bad things happen to your system or your data that harms others or harms yourself here. So similar to how there could be a storm that can damage your property, this covers you when there's something like a data breach or a ransomware attack that impacts you and your ability to access the data or to expose it to others. What it covers kind of three broad categories. One are certainly lawsuits. So if you are hacked and that's damaged someone, it could be a client of yours as an example, and then they sue you, that this will cover in that situation. It will also cover you for the cost you have to incur getting yourself back up and running, identifying what happened, certainly the legal fees associated with it. If you have a data breach, the sending out those letters that I'm sure we've all received, or offering the credit monitoring. And if you have a ransomware attack, in certain cases, depending upon the coverage, it may even pay for that ransom just to get you back up and running if your backups aren't where you need them to be. And then it will also cover you for lost profits while you're down. The average ransomware attack can leave businesses down 26 days. And if you think about your ability, what your ability to maintain your organization during that period of time, you're probably going to be having to spend additional dollars to keep things going, or your revenues may suffer. So this will cover you for those lost profits there as well. One other thing that I should mention in the costs incurred, there is coverage typically at lower limits for what's known as business email compromise, e-fraud, when someone pretends to be, if it was in Solve IT, somebody sent an email to Eddie's controller saying they're Eddie and they needed to wire money. If someone did that, that would be social engineering, and there's typically coverage for that. There's also coverage in the case of what's known as invoice manipulation fraud, which is where someone gets into your system. They then send notes to your clients saying, hey, we've changed our wiring our bank, here's new wire instructions, and all of a sudden you're not getting paid the extent that you thought you would. So there's coverage there in those situations as well. I want to talk about what's occurred these days in terms of the underwriting process. In the past, if you had a firewall and could write a check, you basically could get coverage. What really happened, and we'll actually show it in a graph momentarily, is that ransomware happened, COVID happened, and the cyber insurance marketplace had to change because of what they were seeing in terms of losses. And now what you're subject to is really going through an in-depth review. Those one-page applications became 20-page applications in some situations. You're being asked to understand a lot of acronyms that you may not have understood before. And I'm sure you're giving some of parts of your applications to organizations like Eddie's to help complete. And the reason behind this is really what the insurance trends that occurred. And what I'm showing you is a graph. The green bars represent premium, and the blue line represents what's known as loss ratio. Loss ratio is basically the ratio of claims to premium. So when the loss ratios are high, the carriers aren't making as much money, as opposed to when the loss ratios were low. And you can see really until about 2018, as premium was growing, loss ratios weren't too bad. Carriers were making money there. And then beginning in 2018 and really spiking into the COVID area, 2020, when everyone started working from home, and ransomware became more and more migrated from an individual attack to a commercial business enterprise attack, the loss ratios spiked up. And what do carriers do? We'll talk about that in a moment. But what carriers typically do is they just raise the rates. And you can see the rates increased 154% in 21 and 22. And that largely was the reason for the loss ratios going down. And it's important to note that that when you see the blue line going down, it doesn't mean that the threat has gone away. It just means that the carriers have been able to charge more rate to cover the losses that they have there. And So the threat is still out there. Ransomware is still a major area of attack for the bad guys, as well as a business email compromise. As I mentioned here, and last year, funds transfer fraud, business email compromise really kind of outpaced ransomware in terms of the losses that the carriers were seeing here. We'll talk about that in a moment. And also just want to highlight some key loss factors also. What were the reasons for the claim in the first place? Well, certainly phishing is primary. So you may or may not know, but the human risk is typically 86% of the incidents. And phishing isn't the only area of human risk, but it is certainly a prime one. Unresolved vulnerabilities, not patching your systems, not having the operating system up to date. If any of you have the laptops and you see that little red dot next to your gear as an example, and that just has been there for a while, that means that perhaps that you need to patch the system there. Unresolved or end-of-life software and hardware. So typically when Microsoft, as an example, they release an operating system. That operating system has a shelf life, and at some point that shelf life ends, and they stop supporting it. And then if you are still running on those old operating systems, the vulnerabilities will continue to creep in, and the bad guys will certainly take advantage of them. And then misconfiguration. There's a big move into the cloud environment these days, as an example, which is great in a lot of ways. It doesn't mean that AWS or Google, though, is responsible for configuring your cloud environment. You still have to do some things in terms of setting the right security permissions. And that's one example of where misconfiguration comes into play. So these are the key loss factors. And I would just emphasize these key loss factors are really areas that organizations Eddie's organizations really can help you with if you're not working with Solve IT already. This is just one of many areas that they're going to be looking at and making sure that you have a secure, stable environment that's up to date, and to make sure that you're addressing in an appropriate way the human risk side of the equation too. I mentioned a little while ago what carriers do when they lose money in terms of raising the rates, and that certainly is probably the biggest lever they pull. There's a couple other levers. One is they exit. They say, "Okay, we've had enough. Thank you," and they just cut their losses and run. The other is that they reduce limits as well. So instead of offering 10 million in limits, they're now only going to offer 3 million there. And then one thing they're certainly do is they're going to pay a lot more attention to what they're writing here, and trying to evaluate the risk much more. And that's where those applications went from the 1-pagers to the 30-pagers here. And what they're looking for is areas that have to do with the business, and then areas that have to do with the security itself. And so with regards to the business, what is the business stability? If you've been around a while and you're demonstrating a consistent client base, retentions are good, that's to your benefit. The types and volumes of data that you have. So hospitals, as an example, are a higher risk than certain retail establishments here. Obviously, financial institutions as well. So that type of data, keeping the PHI, the health information, personal information as well, such as social security numbers, credit cards, things like that. That goes towards evaluating the risk. The types of governance that you have. How are you actually looking and thinking and talking about this type of risk within your organization? Industry has a big play into it as well. And revenue size is the key, is the first thing that the carriers look at when they start pricing out the risk. So they take the revenue, they then may take the industry, and then look at the other factors and build up or down depending upon where those factors come in. And certainly they look hard, and they're looking harder at what technical controls you actually have in place here. And when I say technical controls, I'm not saying they're looking to see whether you have XYZ product or ABC product. They just want to make sure that you have certain have certain controls in place to manage and mitigate risk. And I'm going to just talk over kind of what a basic insurability kit includes here. And number one is multi-factor authentication. It's rare that you're going to be able to even get cyber insurance if you don't employ multi-factor authentication. Certainly for all remote access, and if you have privileged users, those that have access to your systems environment, they should have multi-factor authentication locally when they're in the shop as well. I talked about how keeping your systems up to date is critical. Patching is a real critical activity that the carriers are looking at. Are you keeping those systems up to date? That minimizes the vulnerabilities. Are you backing up your systems? Do you have backup solutions? You know, if there's a ransomware attack and you need to restore your data, has it been in a secure location? Did you use credentials that are different than your normal credentials? Is it encrypted? And have you tested it to actually see if you can actually restore it? These are some things that you should be doing, or working with organizations like Eddie's to help you. Unexposed, or making sure that your what's called RDP and SMB ports are not exposed to the internet. You don't have to understand what those acronyms mean. Just write them down and then reach out to someone on your IT staff and say, hey, are these exposed to the internet? The RDP, remote desktop protocol, is next to phishing the highest is the most effective mechanism for the bad guys to begin a ransomware attack. That's, they'll get in through those RDP ports there, and then they have at it into your systems. Next gen AV, email filtering. There's again more acronyms that you don't have to learn yourself, but you should be talking to your IT folks about. DMARC, SPF, DKIM. Those are ways to really identify who you are when you're sending emails out, and it really helps minimize spoofing and those type of social engineering attacks. Endpoint detection and response, so that if something is going on one of your laptops or in your systems environment that's not usual, this type of these solutions can identify them and take action. Encryption, locking down the system, preventing, if you lose a laptop, that you don't, that the bad guys, even if they get into the system, your laptop, won't be able to get the data. That's important. We talked about human risk and security awareness and training, phishing simulations. These are all critical to help educate your staff as to what are the threats out there, what are the things that you should be paying attention to, how should you, respond to emails, and what you'd be looking out for. And then, as talked about, more and more organizations migrating to the cloud. Cloud security is really an area of focus. Eddie talked about incident response planning at a future is coming up at a future webinar. That's critical. There's an inverse relationship between the cost of an incident and the quality of your IR plan and your ability to execute against it. And I'd also recommend you test it periodically to make sure that everyone understands what their role is and what needs to be done when it's calm, as opposed when stuff is hitting the fan. And then you'll also, in a future webinar, it sounds like you'll be learning about MDR, SOC solutions. These actually, are really critical because what they do is they take in all the data that's coming out of your system, and especially the anomalous, and they're able to, kind of triage them, figure out what's noise versus what's real, and in some situations take action, or at least alerting the teams to it. So it's a critical area here. And what we've done in partnership with Solve IT, we've actually taken a big segment of these for businesses under 50 million in revenues, and we've wrapped it into basically guarantee issue cyber insurance. We call it Cyber Express. If you have these critical security controls in place, you can get $1 million of coverage. If you're under 25 million in revenues, it's 1775. That's an annual premium plus taxes and fees. And then if it's 25 to 50 mil, you're paying 2040. And there's some subjectivities with regards to industry, and you can learn about that more from us here. But what I hope that I've done here is given you kind of a brief view, what cyber insurance is, how the market has had to, deal with the changes in the threat landscape in terms of its underwriting and risk selection, and what you should be having in place from a security standpoint, as well as other standpoints within your business, to make sure that you're being covered, and you understand what that coverage is for, and that you're getting the best possible terms for it. So really appreciate your time. I'm just going to kind of go back to this slide, and just, Eddie, if you wanted to comment on any of these solutions and how you look at those as you're building out the risk environment for a client.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Doug. Yeah, we at Solve IT, it's deliberately ambiguous. We actually address all of those areas for our clients, and we start with a risk assessment. So we're going to take a look at every one of these areas and determine where gaps might exist, and then provide that information to our clients and explain the risk that's involved with those gaps. And then if they wish, we can provide a solution to fill those gaps and mitigate the risk. So start to finish, we handle everything that's here in this insurability kit. Now, whether or not clients choose to adopt all of these components, that is entirely up to them. It's our job to make sure they understand the risk involved and make informed decisions.
Right. Great. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Doug. We really appreciate your time today.
Sure.
So in conclusion, we all know cyber attacks are on the rise, and there's really nothing any of us can do about it. So that's why Solve It and Seed Pod Cyber have formed our partnership to ensure that, number one, we have the best protections available in place for our clients, and number two, we have the best cyber insurance coverage available in place for our clients. If you'd like to speak with me one-on-one about your IT protections, you can raise your hand in the chat or email me at eclark@solveit.rocks. To begin a no-cost evaluation of your existing cyber liability coverage, or find new coverage, perhaps those express programs that Doug mentioned at reduced rates. I'm going to put another link here in the chat. You can click that, and there is a pretty easy form to fill out with some very basic information that will go directly over to Doug and his team, and then they will start the conversation with you. They have some other simple wraparound questions based on how you answer the initial ones in the form. And from there, they can make recommendations and give you pricing.
That's right. Great.
All right, great. Well, do we have any questions from attendees? I see no questions in the chat. So I guess that's going to be it for today. Doug, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your expertise and your time conveying that information to us about secrets of cyber liability.
All right. Thanks so much, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Have a great day, and thank you everyone for attending.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.